Hi guys, welcome back to another video, or your first video here, I don't know. Welcome if you're new here, welcome either way. So this is going to be, again, quite late, my reading wrap up for July 2023. So the way that I structure these wrap ups is I go from the books I didn't finish, and then from star rating from 1 star up to 5 stars. And hopefully this will be a little bit of a shorter video than last month, given the fact that I had quite a number of rereads. So I'm going to start off with the books that I did not finish. First one is More Me With You. This is a book that I got off Audible. I either think in a sale or it was part of their like free range. So this I pretty much picked up because it was marketed as queer. Now that a couple of months have passed, it's really left my brain, but I either really didn't like the writing or I didn't like the characters, and yep, I decided to give up on that one. And the other two I have are books from, there was some sort of sale going on where someone had a sale again of books that were marketed as queer, and I decided to give a few of them a go, and they were just bad. So we have Vampire Slave and Dominate Me. Both of these were just really badly written. I mean, neither of the plots really excited me all that much. It was more a case of trying to just expand the list of authors that I read from in terms of LGBT fiction. No. Next we have a graphic novel called Meanwhile. Now I really love what this graphic novel was trying to do. So it is a sort of short story collections where they got a bunch of people together to hear their experiences being queer in, I believe, Southern Africa. I can't quite remember exactly where, but somewhere in Africa. And I just love that that is a project that was going on. For me, it was just the art style really did not work for me. I think that more books like this need to exist, but just not for me. And finally, for my DNFs, we have another graphic novel, Ghost Stories. And again, art style didn't work for me. I liked the sound of the synopsis, but no. Also, if I'm itching my head a lot or playing with my hair, it's because I recently shaved this side and bleached this, so it's just a little bit itchy. I didn't need to say that. Anyway, now on to my 1 stars. So I had a reread this month of all of the Belinda Blinked series, and that is the series of erotica novels that is read by the My Dad Wrote a Porno podcast. So I love the podcast. I love the commentary on these books. However, through listening to the podcast, I also have technically reread the book series. So, I mean, the reason why they're getting 1 stars is because I think they're badly written. However, it is a really enjoyable experience to listen to that podcast. So, hence why I still reread them. I just needed something light, I think. Then I have 1 3-star, and that is called Strays. So this again was either a sale book on Audible or was in their like free catalogue for a little while. And so I think this book had a lot of potential, but didn't really lead, like, I don't think it really grasped that potential to its fullest extent. It was following characters who are all paranormal entities, and our main character, well, one of our main characters doesn't know his powers or what he is capable of, and the other one is already sort of in this world. I just think that the expectation of this character to fully grasp everything was just too much. I think that they really should have done a better job in introducing him to this world because he wasn't familiar with it. And I also think that the magic system was quite poorly explained. I find it really useful in books like these where you have a main character who is very new to all this to not only be in their head, but to be in the head of another character who has already been a part of that world. And normally that's a really great way of introducing your reader to something without having for that character to explain it all to that main character. But it just wasn't done very well. I really liked the queer relationship that happened in here, and I think that it did a really good job of exploring how young people, and especially gifted young people, can be manipulated into doing things that they don't want to do for the service of someone else. I also think it did a really good job of exploring the idea of shapeshifting in terms of matter exchange. So this wasn't really a concept I've seen a lot before, although I don't read a lot of shape-shifting books, so maybe this is something that's seen a lot. However, it did a really good job of explaining how, let's say someone is able to shapeshift into a canine form. If they, like, if a human were to shapeshift into a chihuahua, you've got X amount of human matter shifting down to a very small shape. So they were talking about how that's often very messy because you are then reducing the amount of matter that you are. Same with going to a larger shape. So I think that that was a really interesting concept explored. But yeah, I just think that I don't see myself continuing in the series. The explanations needed more work. Next, I have a couple of 4 stars, one of which I do own, so let me get that. So we have Drag Dictionary, and this is a book that goes through a bunch of concepts that are, and phrases that are used often in drag that people not familiar with the subculture probably wouldn't know and need some information. I think this does a very good job of, one, explaining those things, but also taking from a variety of subcultures and types of drag and not only focusing on what is currently seen as culturally acceptable in terms of what drag means and is. And it's accompanied by a lot of great artwork. And I think this is a great resource for people that I think someone new and wanting to learn and understand more could really benefit from. My next 4-star is The Ethical Slut. So this is a book that's often brought up as sort of a very quintessential text explaining the concept of polyamory. So that is where people have multiple romantic partners, where everybody involved is aware of the fact that that is happening. And so personally not my thing, but I wanted to know more about it, and so I found this really interesting. I think that it did a really good job of explaining things for an outsider, but also for people who are currently think that they are or might be polyamorous and want to practice that safely and consensually and do so in the most open way possible. I think it gave a lot of really good advice, so I found this really interesting. And my last 4-star is A Legacy of Ancient Oaks. So this is a book that I got for my dad a little while ago. My dad really loves oak trees, and I found this book in Kew Gardens about an artist who had a project where they did incredibly detailed pencil drawings of a bunch of incredibly famous old oak trees. And the reason why I've put this in the 4-star, not the 5-star, despite the fact that the art was remarkable, was because of the foreword. I think it lost me a little bit, and I think this is just a me thing though. I think that someone who is incredibly into art and art history, and probably also an English literature student, I think would also really appreciate that intro being there. But for me, I found that, and this is often my problem with analysis of texts where you can't talk to the person who wrote it, I just think that some of the metaphors and some of the links just went too far, and I'm often thinking in certain discussions like this, how could you have known that that's what they meant out of this artwork, and how could you have known that that's what they were trying to portray? So I find those distracting, I think. Basically, the intro was talking about not only this man's work, which was very interesting, but also about the history of nature and especially trees depicted in artworks. So overall, a really interesting read. So now on to my 5 stars. So first of all, we have a reread of Swordheart. This has been going around everywhere at the moment over BookTube, especially in the past sort of, I would say, 2 years or so. And that is because cozy versions of established genres are really popping off at the moment. People just want something lighter and nicer in their lives when the world is burning down around them. And I just think that's wonderful. So I picked this one up a little while ago, earlier this year. Really loved it. And I think I was going on a long car journey and just like needed something to listen to, so I picked this. In this, we're following a woman who, now this setup might seem a bit darker, but I promise you it's not, than what you would associate with a cozy fantasy. But her husband has died and she has been living for a while now as a maid/servant in the house of an extended family member. He then dies of, I believe, old age, and she has been gifted all of his inheritance, much to the chagrin of all of the rest of the family members. And so they lock her in her room and basically say, you are only allowed out if you agree to marry your cousin so that we can get the money. And she does not want that to happen and cannot see any way out for herself apart from killing herself, and therefore she takes a look around the room and finds this ancient old sword and takes it out of its sheath in order to fall on it. However, when she does so, a man pops out of the sword and he says to her that he is the ruler of the sword and now is serving her because she is the wielder. And it is about the adventures that they get on to try and get her, 1, away from those family members, and 2, in possession of her rightful inheritance. So this is just such a fun story. I think the characters are incredibly brilliant. I love following them and the way that they come to respect each other, and the relationships that form were incredibly wholesome and incredibly respectful, and I just loved it. My next 5-star kind of goes along with the fact that I reread Belinda Blinked, and that is that I re-listened to the My Dad Wrote a Porno podcast. So I'll pop up the My Dad Wrote a Porno book, and technically I count this as a 5-star read with the Belinda Blinked being within it. Anyway. And lastly, so this is where all that rereading comes in. I think that I was just having a really stressful month, and therefore I wanted to put something on to be able to experience reading but not have to think about, not have to have that active part of my brain going, so what's happening, where's this plot beat going, what's happening to this character, blah blah blah. And I just wanted something to reread, so I ended up rereading Kill the Farm Boy 8 times in July. I must have just like had the audiobook on, I started it, I finished it and just like went straight back to the start and just did that like 8 times. And yeah, I think I really needed it that month. It is a fantasy novel poking fun at fantasy tropes. So we have a farm boy who is designated the chosen one by a pixie. He goes off on an adventure and ends up in an accident, and the rest of the characters in the cast of characters then have to go on a journey to try and fix what happened. So this book is utterly hilarious, but also has some really touching moments. I think the character development is great. All of the characters are really distinct, and with a cast that's so large, I felt like I got to know every character equally. I don't think there was a weak point, and I just think it did such a good job of rounding up the plot despite being primarily a humour book. So yeah, this was just such a comforting read for me this month. And yeah, those are the books that I read in July. Please do tell me something you've read recently. I'd really love to hear about it down in the comments below, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!